What's going on, guys? Sensible Prepper Live. We are going to be talking about something today that is very near and dear to a lot of people at this point. We have wildfires all over, and we've seen wildfires, the destruction, and what happened really in California, which was a big deal. And then even here on the East Coast, there are a lot of wildfires. I did a video just recently where I was using my Maxpedition Monsoon. I was up at Caesar's Head, South Carolina, up on the mountain, and that place is on fire. And so is the view that I was showing out from that area is on fire, Table Rock State Park. And so we're going to talk about it because there are some things you can do. And I'll be honest with you, I was just talking to Sarah Mack and Seth. They're here right now with me. And there are things on this list that I need to do. You know, you don't think about these things at the time because wildfires, they're not something that normally happens in our area or in the general area that we're in. California, we seem to have more trouble with that. But here in our area, we have not had really that much trouble with wildfires. So we're going to look at it. We're going to talk about it. And first thing I want to do is big thanks to Sarah Mack. She will be monitoring the questions and comments. If you have something you want to ask, we're going to take a couple of breaks and we're going to talk about it. We're going to go through this pretty quickly. I do have a list in the description if you want to look it over later. And just because this is a very vital topic. And also, we want to give a big thank you to Exotac for fire kits. This is a funny time to talk about fire kits, but fire is part of survival. It's part of nature. It's part of what we do. And fire will boil your water. It'll cook your food. It will give you light. It will give you heat, but it will also burn your house down. So be careful with fire, but have a good fire kit because fire is essential to survival. You get 20% off using Suits20 with the link down below in the description. And so we really appreciate Exotac. They're the best fire starters out on the market. And so whether you go with Exotac or not, you need a fire kit. Also, one book that I just highly recommend, and I'm not going to be able to get this in later, but this is the Modern Survival Manual for the Coming Economic Collapse, written back in 2001 about actual events that happened in Argentina. And these events can happen right here and have been happening right here. So this is one of the best books. It will change your perception or your perspective on being prepared, especially for an economic situation. And we have an Amazon link down below. You can click on it. And it is actually, we sell a lot of these. And I'm glad because this is something that helps people. I'm going to tell you guys, this is a great book. And for Fowl is just top-notch guy. And also visit our website at suitsgear.com. And we have some pretty cool stuff over there. And check that out. There's a lot going on. And we do giveaways. In fact, we're doing a giveaway right now of the Academy Bug Out Bag that we just reviewed. We're going to give that bag away for the month of March. All the content's in it. And just run over to suitsgear.com, enter with your email address, and we will put you on the list. And it's good stuff. All right, let's get to it. First off, let's look at these fires that are going on. One is just lack of maintenance in the forest. That can be a big issue with a lot of undergrowth and brush piles and different things. And that's really what's happened in California. It's just really poor forestry. And a lot of that has to do with the green movement where people, save the trees. The problem is fire is a natural occurrence in forest. Wildfires are natural. Wildfires burn forest out, and then all this new growth that comes up is just part of the way of our world. And so if those items that are the leaves and the limbs and everything else that get all along the bottom of and they're just dying and decaying, and this just helps to clean that out. It's natural. One of the things I've always said is to me, forests are a blessing. They are a resource, and you can use them and you can harvest it and do good things with it, or it's just going to burn up. So take your choice, and then it'll take everything else with it. So one of the things about that we've been experiencing, especially here, is lack of rain. We've had very little rain, and we've had high winds. It's really been kind of crazy, and that really leads to spreading the fire really quickly. Right now at Table Rock State Park, which is, I think there's over 1,000 acres that are burning, and they haven't contained it. They can't get it contained. So hopefully it won't reach all the way down here. Hopefully. But it was funny because some of these things were started by just guys that were hiking. There were like 14 people. They were hiking. They built a fire, and that's what started this fire. It just was the right element. But sometimes it's arson, and we saw that in California where people were actually lighting fires. And it can be just lightning. Lightning can start a fire. So, and fires are fires. When they're coming, they're coming. It doesn't matter who started them, they're started. And you got to figure out a way. Now, we're going to give you some different points, and some of these are proactive. In fact, all of these really are proactive. And so some of these may be a little bit more harder to do. It may be a little more of a long-term thing. But with the way we've seen over the past few years, and with insurance companies coming in, and especially out in California saying, hey, if you don't do these things, we're not going to insure your place. And with the state specifically. And so that's also something to consider. So there may be, you may look at this and go, well, man, that's going to be kind of expensive to do that. But is it more expensive than your house and the value and the contents? So first off is you want to create a barrier. You want to create a defensive barrier around your home. Now, I've seen this less and less of bushes and things in front of houses. It's kind of not as stylish as it was or in vogue as it used to be, where you had a lot of vegetation around your house. People seem to be putting out mulch, and they'll do different things. But if you have a lot of vegetation around your house, that can be a problem. Dried grass. If you have dried grass that's come up, you're not maintaining your property maybe like you should. You don't have a homeowners association breathing down your neck. Those kind of things happen with just debris, limbs, things that get around your house. Keep that clean. If there are dead trees, take care of those, especially if they're close to the house. Now, you want to make a barrier of about 30 feet from your house. That's pretty much like the minimal distance. You need to get that 30-foot barrier around your house. Keep things clean, keep things tidy, and keep those limbs and everything, especially during the wintertime. Like right now, we're just starting to get into cutting grass. And so a lot of maintenance that goes on in the spring has been neglected. It's kind of natural with a lot of people. And so having that debris, the dead grass, the bushes and dead trees, all that stuff, just go ahead and clean that out. It's even better to get to a 100-foot barrier. That's really the optimum. But 30 feet is really considered to be a good distance to kind of keep things at a distance. And then you have sloped areas. If you have any sloped areas, which it's funny, on the front of our house, we have a big slope that goes down. That's actually good. On the back side of our house, we actually have a slope up. And so that whole area we need to kind of keep clean, and we need to make sure, because there's a lot of trees back there. It's a prime area to be able to spread fire. And so those are areas, and you're just creating a barrier for the fire not to hop over to another area. A lot of times roads are good for that, because the roads come down the center, and it will keep fires from spreading and jumping, but they can jump across the freeway, especially if you have a lot of vegetation that's up next to the roads. And it's one of the reasons why that a lot of places keep the roads kind of clear, and keep that at bay, because it just helps to keep the fire from jumping from one spot to another. Thin out dead trees, or not even dead trees, but dense trees that are around your house that are close, and cut out limbs that are like 6 feet to 10 feet up. One of the things about having a tree, especially a pine tree, because these tend to have, or cedar trees, things like that, they have a lot of vegetation toward the bottom, and they have a lot of limbs. And so you want to cut through all those limbs, get that stalk or the trunk kind of free, and it keeps from what they call the ladder effect. What happens is the fire will climb up the limbs into the main part of the tree, which is a lot more difficult to put out. And so just go ahead and start cutting up and getting that out of the way. And, and one thing that I just bought was a pole saw, and it has a little chainsaw at the end. It's a Milwaukee, and it's electric, and I can just get up there, and man, I can cut those limbs out. It makes it really good to be able to reach those areas where you can't get to, and it'll go up to over 10 feet. So it gives us a lot. In fact, once Helene was here, and we were cleaning out a lot of area, that pole saw came in handy like crazy, even as much as a chainsaw, a standard chainsaw. And I would highly recommend getting one that is electric, because if you get one that you plug in, which is electric as well, you got to pull the cord around. It's really ungainly. So just a little pro tip is get something, or a gas powered one, but they tend to be a lot more heavy. So I like a little small electric pole saw, and it's a Milwaukee, and I get up there. In fact, I did a review on it. I love that little saw. Even I have one of the saws that's just a hand saw. It's like that. So when I went to get the pole saw, I picked up a Milwaukee because I really liked it. It really worked out well. But you want to get that, all that vegetation, you want to get it cleaned out, get it away from your house, get those trees thinned out. And really, that's where the fire will spread. It's underneath the tree canopy. And then it can spread up if it catches on. And then once you get it in the canopy, it's really a big mess then. It's very hard to keep contained. Keeping your lawn mowed. Right now, it is starting to grow. We have been cutting some. We haven't personally, but there's been people around us that have been cutting. We're getting ready to start back cutting grass because grass does build up. And of course, in the wintertime, you have a lot of fresh grass that's coming up. But that is a great place for fire to travel. You got to think, what is it that's flammable? And vegetation is flammable. Again, it's part of the natural order. Things just tend to burn, and it cleanses it. And so if you go ahead and keep that kind of cut back, keep things cut back, and it keeps that dead grass or the tall grass from growing up, which could spread fire. Also, if you can water your lawn. Now, for us right now, I guess we could probably water our lawn, but in a lot of areas where water is kind of short, especially if you have a well and it's been dry for a long time, that may be, you may need to reserve your water. But if you're able to, or if there are fires in the area and you've already started doing some maintenance around your house. Listen, guys, a fire could start anywhere. It can spread, and it may not be right at your house, but we saw that in California. It went through large neighborhoods, burned a lot of houses. In fact, I just saw an interview with Mel Gibson. He was talking about that because one of his houses burned to the ground while he was doing a podcast with Joe Rogan, which was kind of crazy. And so you want to have some kind of burn barrier if you can. Now, one thing too is, and there's a number of reasons to do this, but the tree may be 30 feet out, but the limbs hang over. Now, we have a couple of places where we had a couple of limbs that hung over our roof. And one of the problems is you have to have that cut back for insects is one of the first reasons, because they'll get at the end of that limb and they'll drop onto your roof, and then they start to get into your attic areas, your crawl space, things like that. But that can also transfer fire across the limb, and it can land on top of your roof. If you have good asphalt, shingles, those things can catch on fire as well. So that's one thing. You want to keep those limbs away from your house. You want to keep them put back. And, it was funny. For years, I've seen houses where, they had a tree canopy. It just looked really cool in the summer and had shade, and it was really nice. And then I've seen houses that are sitting out in the middle of a field with no trees anywhere around. And I always thought, man, that's got to be hot. But listen, the thing is, that's going to be a much better protection from fire when you have all these trees. And plus, it's a lot less maintenance, honestly. But having that area create a defensive barrier around your place. Again, 30 feet, but 100 feet is even better. And that is going to help. And two, like I said, if the fires are already in your area, go ahead and get out there and start cleansing it. But if you can do this beforehand, then you're that much ahead. All right. Number 2 is harden your home. Now, right now we have a wooden deck on the front of our house, and we have one on the back. And we've been talking about it. We're planning to build a new deck. We're going to get rid of the old deck. We're going to extend this deck out. We're going to do some different things to it. And one of the things I hadn't really thought about is fire retardant materials. Now, obviously, you have things like concrete and you have metal. You can build a metal deck, but they also have fire retardant materials that are synthetic that mimic the look of wood, but it just has fire retardant materials. Typically, it's class A. That is your number one fire resistant material. Class B is good. It's okay. It is more fire retardant, and it's probably a little less expensive as you go down the line to Class C and you move down. But Class A is typically top rated for fire resistance. And so you're building a deck, instead of going with wood, you're going with the synthetic materials, or you're using other materials that are fire retardant. And that is one thing, especially on a house. You get the front of the house and you get a big wood deck, and especially one that's been around for a while like ours has, and it's time to replace it. And why not replace it? It's going to cost you a little extra money, but it's going to help in case there is any kind of fire coming around. If you build your barrier around your house, like we talked about, a defensive barrier, that's going to be a little bit less of a problem, but it's always good because embers float. And so we want to make sure that we don't have embers that float and get caught on certain places. Exterior walls. Now, for us, we have vinyl siding, and there are a lot of wooden houses, log cabins that are around, and a lot of times those will burn. So having a brick or stucco, walls, exterior walls, that's going to help. That can be extremely expensive if you already have a home. So that is one thing to consider. But these are just some of the prime things. You may not be able to do all of these, but at least you can think about it and see what you have. I mean, for us, we have a rock facing that's about 4 feet up on the bottom. And that would probably give some protection, especially if we have a low-lying vegetation that's burning. But those that vinyl siding can go up without too much trouble, I think. And I have a list here because we have so many things. And so I'm kind of going through here. And I'm going to tell you this, Sarah Mac, I'm going to go through a couple of things, so get ready in case we do have some questions. Okay, so install ember barriers. And what that means is this restrictive screen. It's about 1/8 of an inch thick. In your crawl space, you have vents that are on the, in fact, we have them all along our crawl space, and we have these little areas, the vents, and we have this mesh that fits up to it. And a lot of times they don't have that mesh to be able to protect it. If the vents are open and an ember kind of floats around and goes through that, it can create fire, and then it can be under your house, which you definitely don't want your supports and your beams under there. So go ahead and get some kind of screening to put, and it just defeats the embers. But also in your attic vents, that can also have embers can just kind of come through, and plus it can have insects. I know I have a buddy of mine. Well, in fact, Robbie was talking about this one time, and he had bats that got into his attic, and he had a mesh set up on one side, but on the other side, it was just an open space. And they came in, and he said there were 100 bats. He said it was crazy. It took a while to get rid of them. So, that's not only for fire, but it's also just for insects and just for, pests that might come in. Squirrels are notorious for that as well. So this isn't just for fire. It's also just to keep unwanted guests and unwanted embers out of your attic and out of your crawl space. So you want to make sure you do that. All right. Let's see. Replace. Okay, I've already done that. Replace wooden decks. So I must have missed something up top. No, replace wooden decks. That's one thing that you're going to do with metal or concrete or whatever. Heat resistant paint. If you're painting something, if you have something outside, there are paints that are heat resistant. And so it's not going to be the end all, but it definitely will help. And sometimes, fire can kind of be funny. In fact, the picture that I have on the thumbnail is a house that actually escaped fire. You can see the fire going around it, but that house ended up not being touched. And so the big thing is they had some sort of barrier around their house. And some of it was just the luck of the wind. Sometimes the wind can blow certain directions, and then you can get that those embers. And that's really the big thing, is the embers moving from one to the other. The other day I was out here. In fact, I probably shouldn't have been, but last week I was out here burning in a burn barrel. And there was a couple of times where I was putting things in there, and a couple of embers kind of flowed out and landed and started to catch fire. So I was just really monitoring that really closely. And that's one thing that's really important to do too. If you are doing any kind of burning, is to keep it monitored, make sure, and when you finish, to put it out. Seal gaps around your doors. Now, the one thing about it, with doors, windows, things like that, embers can come through. And so you want to make sure that it's good and sealed to keep that fire out and keep the embers out. And so, whether it's windows, underneath, again, with your crawl space, with your attic, the better you have your house sealed, the better it's going to be as far as getting any kind of ember intrusion. They can be very small and just float in and get something started. All right, if we got any questions, we're going to go to that and then we'll continue
on. JAC asks where Robbie is.
Robbie has started a brand new career, and he is on the road. And so we talked about it, and he said, hey, I might like to stop by sometime, but he's setting up, and this is funny, but he's setting up medical clinics all across the Southeast. And so, in fact, mainly in South Carolina at this point, but he could travel on out of there. So he has been out of town, and I have actually not even talked to him lately because he has been so busy. We really miss Robbie. He has been such a big part of what we've done for a long time. So I guess you guys just have to settle for me.
Chris Sowell asks, Sarah Mack, I have a question. If your house catches fire, guns and ammo are stored in a fire. My guns and ammo are stored in a fireproof safe. Will the ammo explode or just become ruined from the extreme heat?
Well, the one thing about ammo, in fact, our fire department knows that we have a lot of ammo. I mean, it's on their record. So in case they come down, which, but the one thing about ammo is you've got brass and then you've got a bullet. And what happens is that bullet weighs a heck of a lot more than the brass. So what you're really going to have is a projectile of brass. If it gets overheated, the brass is going to go poof, which will only go about 20 feet. I watched some documentaries about, they took cases of ammunition and piled them up and they lit it on fire. And it was a lot of popping. But the guys that were watching over the fire were within 20 feet. And they said they were hit a couple of times with a little bit of brass, but it wasn't a big deal. So when ammunition catches on fire, it's not going to explode. Now, if you have some black powder, that could be a problem. If you're muzzle loading and you're doing things like that, black powder is pretty volatile. And so that's one thing you need to really take care of. But in a good safe, they're only rated for there's different ratings on the safe. Liberty safes tend to have a better rating, even though Liberty's kind of has a black eye right now. But they tend to have a lot better fire rating and protection of your materials that are inside. But in a long-term fire, one that burns, that's going to burn your house down, typically you're just going to be in a mess. You may be able to retrieve some stuff. My father-in-law he owns an insurance company up in Tennessee, and he had a good friend of his that had $40,000 in cash in a gun safe that was rated fireproof, and it was all burned up. So, if you're able and a fire's coming, the best thing to do is to pack them up and leave. But of course, obviously, fires happen all the time, regardless of wildfires or not, house fires. It will protect your goods some, but it's not going to be the end all necessarily if it's a real full-on blaze where you see the whole house going up. It's probably not going to help a lot. It will help some.
Shark asks, my dad once told me that sometimes arsonists light crops on fire in order to make people come out of their homes to watch the firemen do their jobs. Meanwhile, the arsonists loot the houses for valuables. And although I've never heard of any case of it in my area, I am now a bit worried it could happen to me. What are your thoughts?
That's interesting. It's a diversion tactic. If they know, it would be like for us, if there was a big fire somewhere right close to us, we would definitely come out to see the fire. We would be very much distracted. So I guess that's really something that you would need to consider, something that, you don't really think about. One morning, Sarah Mack was going to work when she worked at another job, and she would leave really early in the morning at about 5 a.m. And I got up one morning, I looked over, and my neighbor across the way, he had a big workshop in the back, and it was full on fire. It was on fire. And I ran over there and woke the people up, and the man was an older man. And I got him up, and his daughter lived next door, and she got up, and then the fire trucks came out. but that could have burned for a good while before anybody knew it. I just, because I was up with her and I just saw it. And, but if somebody was doing that, trying to sneak into my house, I guess my wife would have shot them. Okay, let's go to the next thing is just maintaining your property. Now, we talked about creating a defensive barrier, but there are some differences. Maintaining your house, maintaining the property around your house. One is to keep your gutters clean. Keep the debris out. Debris is flammable, especially if it's been sitting for a while, and getting those gutters clean. Now, for us, we have screens that go through it. We have a whole system that keeps a lot of that out, and that's going to be a big help. And I would highly recommend doing that, not only for fire prevention, but also just because it's a pain in the butt to get up there and clean those gutters. You still have to maintain them at times. One of the problems we found was that a lot of debris sometimes, because we have eaves, the leaves and limbs and different things would get up under those eaves on top of the roof. And so I'm out there trying to clean that off. And keeping that clean, that's a very important part, because that can really burn. It gives the fire something to just bite into. And so having some limbs and leaves and pine needles and things like that is keep them clean, keep them off your house. And of course, then it goes to your decks. If you have decks and you have leaves that have just blown up, or pine needles, and they tend to gather in one place because of the wind, keep that cleaned off. That's going to be a little tinder box. You can take a bunch of leaves and pine needles and you drop an ember in that, and it can catch fire. If it drops on a deck, it's not necessarily going to catch fire. It's going to take a little bit more. So get those tinder boxes and think about it as fire tinder. Well, that needs to go. I got to get that out of the way. Another thing is your fireplace. If you have a fireplace, or you have wood for heat, or maybe you have a fire pit near your house, is if you have stacks of wood, it needs to be, again, at least 30 feet from your house. That's not always convenient. We have a fire pit, and it's not always convenient to have to go to a distance to pick up firewood. But we do have a fire pit that's out and around the back near the woods, and we have our fire pit there. And of course, the firewood's safe there. If you have propane tanks, now propane tanks are pretty stable, and we depend on propane for a lot of our prepping stuff, or for our gas grill, which gas grills a lot of times are sitting right up next to your house. You got that propane tank on there. That is a potential for an explosion. Or you have propane tanks that are set, near your house as well. I know that when we lived in North Carolina, and the house had been around for a while, and the propane tank, and it was probably 15 feet from the house. Now they have a lot of laws. In fact, we're getting a propane tank put in coming up as soon as they can get around to it, because this demand is so high right now. And there are certain regulations where they have to put the propane tank at least 30 feet from your house. And so that just keeps it at a distance. Unfortunately, if a propane tank goes up, especially a big one, it can be really, really bad. So keep all that stuff. If you have gasoline, you shouldn't have gasoline near your house anyway. It should be about 30 feet away. And that's another thing to kind of keep that in an area where it's safe, because gasoline is a lot more volatile than even propane. And so storing gasoline really takes a little bit of extra effort. And we all have lawnmowers and things like that. Well, I say all. Some of you guys live in apartments or condominiums or city, but a lot of us that have property, we have a lot of gas that we use for different things. And sometimes, we have it in places that we probably need to consider. And so for not just the fire going up, but if you have some kind of fire, that's going to be definitely something to consider. And to get that at least 30 feet, if you can get it farther, even better. Avoid having stackables or flammables up next to your house. One thing that we have right now, we have some whiskey barrels that I'm working on. I was going to do a rain catchment. We ended up going with the blue barrels, but these beautiful wood whiskey barrels, I've got them up next to the back of the house. And when I started reading this, I thought, I need to move those things and get those out of the way. And really, they were going to be kind of a more ornate for rain catchment. But now I'm reconsidering that, because the blue barrels are ugly and they're at the back of a house, and we have those set up for rain catchment. But what about those blue barrels are not flammable, or if they are, they're going to just burn and melt. with a whiskey, that thing's going to light up, and we could really have some issues with that. One thing too is your roof, and I think I missed this with hardening your home. With your roof, Class A shingles, if you're going to go with asphalt shingles, again, more fire retardant, it's going to take less for it to burn. I mean, it's going to take a lot for it to burn. Tile, obviously, is going to be something better. But one of the big trends right now is metal roofing. And so, again, it's expensive, but it lasts a long time, and it is going to be fire resistant. So if embers fall on your roof, you've got a metal roof, it's not going to do anything. And so that just gives you another layer of, the more I think about it, the more I think about some of these homes in the Southwest that are more like adobe type houses with, stucco and tile, maybe in the Mediterranean. And that's just going to be a great setup to keep you from, the house going up. Concrete walls, even things like that. In a lot of countries, they do that. And so that's one thing here in the U.S. we do little of. Most of it is stick built. And so those can be tinder boxes. Okay, so maintaining your property, maintaining your home, keeping it clean, keeping things away from your house, making sure your fuels and your flammables are away from your house. Not as convenient, but it can be very vital, especially if you have wildfires. Now, number 4, which these are all listed up to 20 pieces, but number 4 is preparing your water. Prepare to have water. Get your hoses out. If there is an inevitable, the fire's coming or it's getting close, get all your hoses ready. Go ahead and put water on your roof. Go ahead and just soak the roof with water. It's one of the tactics that a lot of firefighters use. They go ahead and wet things down. Keep them wet. It kind of keeps the embers just going out if they do float. And so getting that to your roof, I mean, for us, we have our roof is like 30 feet high. I mean, it's just like, and so, you got to have a good nozzle. Maybe you could spray. Make sure you have some things that you can use. And then another option is to have a sprinkler system. If you have a yard sprinkler system, that's really going to come in handy. You can go ahead and water your lawn and kind of keep it wet, and it keeps fire from spreading as well. And then having some storage tanks. Now, if you have a big storage tank, you're going to need some way to be able to pressurize it, but have some kind of pump, and you can use that water to be able to put out fires as well. Of course, that is a step toward prepping, and you can have some water tanks that are for water for drinking or for washing or doing things, and you can have some water stored up, but it can double up as a source to be able to fight a fire. We also have a pool, and that would also be a source to be able to keep fires down. So prepare your water ahead of time and have some way to pump it, not only for your hose, but also if you have extra sources to be able to use that for water, or you can just douse it if you have smaller cans. Now, this is one that's really important, is your evacuation plan. If you are facing a fire, I will never forget watching video when in Pigeon Forge and Gatlinburg area, they had massive fires up there that burned. And there were a lot of homes that were burned. One of the things that happened, I think I think one of the things that I remember seeing was that this one family was up on this mountain, and they were driving through down the road, and the houses and the street, everything on either side was on fire. It looked like a scene from hell. I mean, it was crazy. I was more concerned that their tires would melt because it gets extremely hot in those areas. And as the guy was coming down, he'd get to a certain place and the fire was engulfing an area. So he'd have to turn, he had to turn around, he had to move around. I mean, and they did get out because we got the video footage. But honestly, I thought these people aren't going to make it. But the thing is, they knew the area, they knew the roads. They really waited too late to leave. But the other side of it is sometimes you can get trapped. In fact, there were some firefighters up here at Table Rock that almost got trapped. They were in a certain area and the fire and the wind blew and it blew up behind them and it surrounded them. And they were able to get out. But, it is a danger, especially as an individual that owns a home and you got fires all around. It's better to go ahead and get your evacuation plan and enact it as the fire starts to move. So having an evacuation plan, that's number one. Having multiple ways to get out. In case you get to one spot and you can't get out, you have to go to another, and that way you can evacuate you and your family. It can be very devastating to get yourself trapped in the middle of a fire area. The whole place is on fire. So you want to have those alternate routes set up. And then listen to the local news. See where things are happening. See how, especially if it's coming near your area. Watch and see and be ready to go. As long as you're not being surrounded, when it gets to a certain point and it gets up close, it can surround you. So you want to go ahead again and make that decide to go ahead and leave when you want to leave. I mean, I'm going to tell you guys, you think about all the things in your house, and to leave it, to have to abandon it, and a fire's coming. There's a lot of things in your house that you really they're very important to you. And you've got to make sure that you have those things maybe prepared ahead of time. So you're not going back to get them, or that your family's in danger. And so you need to have an evacuation plan, and you need to have some things put back. Have an idea of what you're needing to get. I know we've mentioned guns a minute ago. That's something you just really don't want to leave in your home. I had a really good friend of mine years ago. His house caught on fire and it burned up all of his guns. And all that was left were just rusted metal pieces. All the wood had burned off, or the plastics or the polymers had melted. And so all he had was left. And so if there are certain things, especially that are important to you, you need to go ahead and have a plan to be able to evacuate that as well. Computers that you have pictures and basic information on. Make sure you have your credentials and you have insurance papers and things like that. You want to have those important documents prepared ahead of time. And you should have them anyway, because here's the thing, guys. It's just like a bug out plan. If you're going to bug out, same thing. You got to think about, what am I going to take with me? What do I have room for? And what can we put in here? And honestly, I remember James Yeager saying this. He goes, if I'm going to bug out, I'm going to bug out with my big, huge dually truck, and I'm going to have a giant covered 24-foot trailer on the back, and I'm going to have that thing packed out. And really, that's the way it is. A lot of times, we consider the bug out bag. And this is a perfect example of why you need to have a bug out bag. You have the emergency essentials in there. If for some reason you're caught and you have no other way, you've got that bag, you can grab it and go. I have an uncle and aunt that were sitting in their house one time, and they had their gas logs, and a bolt of lightning or something just came out of nowhere, and it somehow ignited that thing, ignited the gas logs. And they were in the kitchen. It happened right in the living room. And when the flash of light happened, they ran right out of the kitchen door. And my uncle just happened to grab the keys to the car. They got in the car, they pulled out, and the house went up in flames. So it may be something to where you don't have anything. So that's why it's important to keep maybe a get home bag in your car. At least you can get to it. But it's really an emergency kit. You need to have that together. You need to have that prepared ahead of time. And you should have it together all the time. Some kind of emergency kit. And then, of course, family relocation. So one of the most tragic stories I've heard about this is a house caught on fire one night, and the family came out. They were all standing out front, and somebody looked over, and the little girl was missing. It was a little 4-year-old girl. And the dad ran back into the house. The house collapsed on him, and he died. The sad thing is the little girl was stepped right outside the back door, and she was watching it from there. So make sure that you have a plan. For us, we plan to meet at our mailbox. It's the family plan. If something was to happen, we get to the mailbox, everybody's safe, we're good. And it doesn't put each other in danger, because I'm telling you, if one of my children was in that house, I would do whatever it took to get to them. I would risk my life, but it's sad to risk your life when there wasn't any reason to. So having a rally point, possibly even a relocation point if the fire is going on all around you and you're evacuating your house. Maybe it should be a certain point you guys go to and say, hey, we're going to meet up here. So that way you know that everybody's safe. Make sure that in your vehicle, your gas tanks are full. Make sure you're ready to go. Really, it's one of the things I try to do. Sometimes I don't. Sometimes I slip and I'm going by and I'm thinking, ooh, I need to get some gas. But try to keep your tanks at least, I always try to keep it at least half to 3/4 full. It's kind of tough when you got 3/4 of a tank and you're driving by the gas station and you're in a little bit of a hurry and you're like, nah, I'll get it later. And then you get it later and you get it later. So try to make a point to keep your gas tanks full in your vehicles. It was just like what happened a few years ago with the pipelines when they were hacked. And then all of a sudden, there was no gas and people were piled up in gas stations. And the first thing I told everyone in my family, I said, hey guys, go out and fill up your cars with gas. And then we did. And so we kind of skirted around that issue. Also, one thing you can do is go to your local fire department and ask them to assess your property. And they can give you a lot of pointers. The thing is for them, it's preemptive. They can go and check it out and they can say, hey, this looks good, or hey, you need to fix this, this, and this. It's in their best interest because if the fire does start, they're the ones that are going to be out there trying to put it out. So there are a lot of things that you can do in your home, such as fire extinguishers. We have this thing called I believe it's the Buddy blanket, and it's a fire retardant blanket, and we keep it next to our stove. And in case there is a fire, when we're cooking or whatever, we can grab that blanket and toss it over it, and it will put the fire out. If you have an upstairs, having a ladder to be able to escape. It's one of the things for us we do. We have one of these roll-up ladders. It's in a bag, and it sits right next to the window. And if you need to escape, you can get out. And it has actually a respirator up there as well. So there are a lot of things you can do for standard house fires. One thing you want to also do is get as low to the ground as possible. And so that way you can go under the smoke, because most people die in fires, especially house fires, from just smoke inhalation. And so having a way to get under the flame and get under the smoke is really vital. And so those are just some extra things. We've got some questions. We'll go to that.
Jonathan M. asks, what about a small stone wall around the house?
Yeah, that would work. I mean, as long as things didn't go over it, but you would definitely be protected from the movement of the flame of the fire. And then, of course, if you're keeping things like we talked about with the defense barrier, and that would be partial defense barrier, just that things could possibly jump over it, but not the main part of the fire. It would mainly be embers and things like that. So, yeah, that would be a good thing.
Not really a question, but Robert Williamson says, I had a 3-level house. I installed Rainbird on each side of the roof with a 1-inch high pressure water I used for summer cooling, but also doubled for fire control. Also my swimming pool pump with hose.
That's good. Yeah, a swimming pool pump, that would be smart. If you have a pool or somebody has a pool that's close by, it would be good to just invest in that pump on your own and say, hey, we need that water. So one of the things that happened up in Table Rock was at first they didn't have a lot of water. And then a lot of people came around. I don't know how they did it. Maybe they brought it in those big 250-gallon tanks or whatever, but they brought water to them, and they made an announcement. They said, we've got plenty of water. Okay, so guys, this is something that obviously we're seeing now. Hopefully it'll pass, but we have seen it. I saw it up in New York. They were having fires in different areas. They were having fires. Again, some of them can be just because it's dry, it's lack of rain, it's just natural. Maybe a lightning struck somewhere and it got the fire started. But again, it could be campers that have built a fire. It could be in your own house. You could be outside like I do, burning fire, have a burn barrel. And that's one thing you probably should really look into, is having some way to have a good place to create fire that's going to have a barrier. I've always had some kind of fire pit, and I've had the rocks, those stone pavers that are from Lowe's, and you can stack them. And so I've stacked a big circle, and I would put my fire, whatever I was burning in there, and then, it would burn, and it would be less out to be able to spread, especially with dry grass. But burn barrels work really well. And of course, it's according to where you live and your neighborhood, things like that. But if you're out there doing any kind of burning, which when this all passes and we get some rain and we have the burn ban, relieved, I'm going to go in and we're going to burn a couple of brush piles that we have that we've been putting off. And now it's too late because, that we can't burn, or cutting some of those limbs is something we can do, and getting rid of some of that material around our house. So for me, this is a great exercise just for me. And I hope that maybe, you're looking around your house, you're thinking, what can I do? If you have like the guy said, with a range system up on the top to cool your house, I mean, that can act as both. And I'm sure there are a lot of other systems out there, especially those in California who have to deal with this on a regular basis. So again, we really appreciate Exotac for sponsoring today's episode. You need a fire kit. Again, it boils your water, cooks your food, gives you light, gives you heat, can keep predators at bay. Having a fire kit is essential, and not just a Bic lighter, guys. That's not enough. You need something that you can really have some confidence in case you ever need to start a fire. Also, highly recommended the Modern Survival Manual for the Coming Economic Collapse by Verfau. Actual events that happened in Argentina. Guys, these are things that actually happened, and man, it could happen here and has happened here. Some of these events have happened here even as we speak. And hopefully this will not be your house right here. And we have an Amazon link down below in the description. And suitsgear.com. Check out Suits Gear. Again, we're doing a big giveaway this month with the Academy Sport Bug Out Bag. We have a lot of merch over there. Hats, shirts, patches, all kind of stuff. We have a lot of prepping things as well, especially on our Amazon store. So you can check that out. And we just really appreciate you guys being here. I hope this helps. Again, this list will be in the description on the video, and it'll help you to kind of get through it. But guys, seriously, fire can happen at any time. And so just make sure that you're in good shape, because it's devastating. So again, a big thank you to Sarah Mack and for reading off the questions and keeping me intact. And we really appreciate you guys for being here. So be strong, be of good courage. God bless America. Long live the Republic.